Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Wellness by Design today. I'm so excited for my guest today. She's been a role model of mine for a long time, Dr. Keesha Ewers. Welcome to Wellness by Design, Dr. Keesha.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm just so thrilled. Wait till people hear your bio because it's very varied and full. So I'm going to read it now. Dr. Keesha Ewers is an integrative medicine expert, doctor of sexology. Now, how interesting is that? Family practice ARNP, psychotherapist, herbalist, and is board certified in functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and is the founder and medical director of the Academy for Integrative Medicine Health Coach Certification Program. Dr. Keesha has been in the medical field for over 30 years. After conducting the HURT, H-U-R-T study in 2013, and the HURT stands for Healing Unresolved Trauma. She developed the HURT model for understanding how past childhood trauma impacts adult health. This led to the creation of the You Unbroken online program for patients to heal their own trauma, and the Mystic Medicine Deep Immersion Healing Retreats she leads at her home on San Juan Island in Washington. Dr. Keesha is a popular speaker, including at Harvard and from the TEDx stage, and is a best-selling author of Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, The Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Emotional Freedom and Vibrant Health. The quick and easy autoimmune paleo cookbook, anti-inflammatory recipes with 7 ingredients or less for busy people. That's most of us, right? And Your Libido Story, a workbook for women who want to find, fix, and free their sexual desire. You can listen to her Mystic Medicine radio show and find her programs at www.drkeesha.com. Oh my goodness. Now, talk about that background, Dr. Keesha. How did you, you started as a doctor. How did all this other stuff get added on?
Actually, I started as a nurse. And,
nurse, really? Okay.
As a registered nurse. The ARNP is an advanced registered nurse practitioner.
Oh,
and
okay.
So I started as an RN in the ICU and then went into hospice also. And was an adrenaline junkie, skydiving, raising 4 children, running marathons all through my 20s. And then when I was in, just past 30, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And that changed everything about my life.
I get that.
I went from being the adrenaline junkie that basically, was such a perfectionist and just whipped myself in, every direction to be the best that I could possibly be, super mom, super wife, super nurse, super marathon runner, whatever it was. Then I had to just start drive myself, and so when I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease, one of the things that, I was on my way to go run a marathon, and bags were packed. My kids, we were all going to Disney World so I could run that marathon. And I woke up in the morning and I had gained 10 pounds overnight of just puffiness over all my joints and
inflammation,
red and inflamed. And it was like someone had taken the batteries out of the Energizer Bunny.
Oh my.
And so I was just flattened and in a lot of pain. And so I got in to see a doctor, and during the course of the history taking process, she asked if I had any family history of autoimmune disease. And I said, yeah, I think my grandfather had rheumatoid arthritis, and he had already died, actually at the age that I am now at 56, and in a wheelchair for a long time with it.
Oh, wow.
So she said, well, I'm afraid you've, kind of drawn the short end of the genetic lottery here of the straws, right? And so here are 2 prescriptions, one's for methotrexate and one's for a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Come back when you get worse, not if, and it will change your meds. That was that answer all those years ago, and it's still the answer 25 years later. And so I said, well, hang on. Like, I make my own food. I'm very disciplined. I run. I'm very healthy. Is there anything else I can do? And, because I knew the side effect profile of these drugs. And she said, no, I'm afraid not. And that was it. So on my way home, I just remember thinking there has to be something outside of my model of medicine. Like, this was all I knew. That was all I'd been trained in, all I'd practiced. I knew nothing about anything else. And so I got home and I on my dial-up modem, computer back in those days, looked for other answers. And I found this PubMed article for yoga and autoimmunity. And the next morning I was in my first yoga class. And in the process of that class, as the instructor was going around in the studio, he was mentioning enough about the science of medicine called Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga from the same texts, 10,000 years ago in India. And he said enough that I got intrigued, and I went home and once again, I got on my computer and looked it up. And oh my goodness, it was like this. The sky opened up and angels were singing, because it said, all those years ago, that we're not all the same. And that, there are these different kinds of constitutional types. And my particular one had a lot of fire in it, which can lead to inflammation. And that, oh yeah, autoimmunity is undigested anger. And I just remember sitting back in my chair and going, well, but I'm not an angry person, and then thinking later, like, oh, that might be part of the problem here. And that maybe I don't even acknowledge or permission anger. And so, that my body was keeping it. And so this idea of digesting an emotion was brand new to me, as well as having an individual constitutional type that needed to be fed and watered and, and treated differently. And mental processes were different. And so I started studying this and got, certified. And as I was studying it, I learned how to meditate. And as I learned how to meditate, I started looking at the word autoimmune. And, one day it was just sort of dancing in front of my third eye space. And I remember thinking, like, auto means I'm doing this to myself. I'm committing suicide in a societally acceptable manner. Like, auto means I'm doing it. And so I remember asking the question, like, oh, when's the first time I wanted to die? And that was interesting, because instead of saying, like, how do I get out of the suffering as quickly as possible? It was more, oh, when did I give myself this message? And because it wasn't the current message I had, like, that's not what I wanted right now. And so, as I followed this little breadcrumb trail of memories backwards, I found this 10-year-old version of myself who was being sexually abused by the vice principal of my elementary school. And I remember looking at her and going, oh, she wanted to die. She didn't understand anything that was going on. She'd tried to tell some teachers and my mom, and, didn't have the right language. And I was a Navy brat and was raised with no television. It was back in the, it was like the 70s. And it was just a different time. And I don't think I even knew the word sex, let alone molestation or abuse or any of that kind of thing. No, and so I just probably said things that my mom couldn't understand, that weren't clear, and plus the vice principal was telling me it was my fault because I was a bad kid. And so when that was going on, then the only way out was up. I remember talking to angels and having this very rich spiritual life in those days, like, okay, if I can't find anyone here, then I'm going to talk to God. And so that actually got me through. And it was an interesting, visual from that 30-year-old version of myself to see her and go, oh, sweetheart, oh, you did. And so we know from science that it takes anywhere from 10 to 30 years to develop a full-blown autoimmune disease. So people that are listening to us right now, like, you could be developing one and you don't know it, right? It takes a long time to get to the final diagnosis of an autoimmune disease. And so I just remember thinking, kind of laughing, like, oh, it's like I have a turkey timer in me, 20 years, ping, you're done, here, you get out. And so, and then going, okay, so that must be, I need to heal that part in order to heal this part. And that they're not separate, and that time's not linear the way we'd like to think about it, that it's all here encapsulated. And so that's what I did. I went and I did things like cut out sugar. I was a complete sugar addict. That's why I ran, was to keep my body weight where I wanted it to be. And then that got me a little bit better. And I cut out gluten, and back in those days, that wasn't such a thing. But Now I do genetic testing on 100% of my patients. And it turns out years later, when I did genetic testing on myself, I'm so intolerant to gluten. And, you know, so that got me another percentage better, but I still wasn't better. You know, I was learning to meditate, practicing yoga, but when I healed that trauma,
yeah,
and a attachment disorder from birth that I had, those two things, right? That, which is another kind of trauma. I had insecure attachment. I had insecure attachment at birth, which made insecure attachment to life. I find that a lot of my patients with autoimmunity have insecure attachment disorders. And so I help them heal those. You know, it's actually not so hard. It's not hard, honestly, to heal this stuff. It just has to get identified.
mm-hmm.
And so within 6 months, my RA was gone and it's never been back. So it's really powerful to take the model of medicine that we have, which tries very hard to separate mind from body, from spirit, from heart, which is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you do that? You know, mm-hmm. and then collapse it into the oneness that we are, and start tracking where those arrested developmental wounds happened, which is all illness really is.
Mm-hmm. I believe that. Keesha, one of the ladies that's watching said, and this is echoing what I was thinking, just to take a breath and acknowledge how brave you are for sharing this. And I know that you have shared this, you know, with many people. I'd heard it before, but just to acknowledge your bravery.
You know that it's completely healed when you can just share it like that. Like, right. That's a really good indicator for people. And Myrna, thank you. That's so sweet of you. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is absolutely unacceptable. It happens to children a lot, unfortunately.
A
lot.
It does.
It's one of the things I teach for the Institute for Functional Medicine. I teach other, doctors how to do what I do, basically. And looking at adrenals and hormones and how they intersect with the immune function and the gastrointestinal system. And then all of that happens from perceptions in the mind. That's what sets off the adrenals in the first place. Yeah. And, they just kind of sit back and they're a little blown away about those connections that are so obvious once you see them. But one of the things I say is, this is one of the reasons your patients aren't getting better, is because you're not asking the questions about their trauma.
Yeah.
You're not asking why they, where and how they feel unsafe and unworthy and undeserving in their bodies, in their lives. And, feeling, when you get cancer, autoimmunity, there's often a trauma just with the diagnosis of feeling betrayed by your own body, by God, by life, by whatever it is. And that betrayal then keeps a ruminating trauma cycle going, which isn't helpful. And so, it's important to heal all of that. And you come out on the other side, like, I know, Myrna, that was the sweetest thing. And I also want to say, and everyone should take a deep breath around this one, is, I wouldn't trade anything in my life for anything. This is something that I see was one of the big opportunities for growth for me. So like to just kind of say sexual abuse is an opportunity for growth is not really the reality if you take it in a black and white terminology. But once you get to the post-traumatic growth of the hero's journey, then you can look back at that and go, oh, had that not been, then this wouldn't be. And then you have gratitude and forgiveness for that event that happened, but you don't have to reconcile with the perpetrator of your hurt.
Right.
So you can forgive, but not reconcile. And people don't understand that there's a big difference. That was part of my sexual work. You don't sit down and have tea with somebody that's been extremely harmful toward you and hasn't showed contrition and gotten help for it and all of those things. You're going to have boundaries. But at the same time, it's really important to engage in the forgiveness work that allows resentment, pain, poison of past trauma to drain from your system.
Yeah, it has to.
So that's really important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know through the hurt study that you did that recognizing, I know you've talked about the ACE scores, which is the adverse childhood events, I think it is, or experiences, and how these, when we've had some of these experiences, it can manifest as illness, does manifest as illness when we get older if we haven't done the release work. And that's some of the stuff that you do. I also find it super interesting, the connection between when these things happen, our perceptions about it, and then how it affects our the rest of our system and even the microbiome. So can you speak a little bit about
the
that?
microbiome,
Especially the microbiome. Let's hear a little bit about that, because I know you've done some extensive studies there.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is there are different models of medicine and science on the planet that track this better than Western. And, you know, they really understand the science of the mind and how when, you know, like it takes 17 different little tiny micro steps in less than a nanosecond. Like if you're looking at my shirt and you say, oh, that's blue, then you've gone through 17 different steps to get from the information coming through your eyes to make up that judgment of, oh, that's blue. And so the way that, you know, the way that that's been tracked in Buddhist psychology is that there are, you know, halfway through those 17 steps, there's an opportunity to pause, because one of the things that they've tracked is however you do your perceptions, right? Your perceiving is how you're always going to do it. So you set up patterns from very young age. You're taught, oh, this is blue. So then you keep saying that's blue for the rest of your life and you don't even think about it. Okay. So you set up habits of mind. And so then if somebody comes along that, you know, like you have a belief you've set up, like I set up one, people in authority can't be trusted, right? Here's the vice principal, you know, it made sense to a 10-year-old child in a trauma situation.
Right.
And it was absolutely true, right? So the problem is that if you then carry that perceptual field forward, then you're going to get into a fight, flight, freeze. And it's usually freeze because when you set that up as a child, you don't have power. So everything's freeze. And so frozen into your system will be, oh, TSA is not safe. Oh, border crossing. Oh, police. Oh, you know, like everyone in authority, government officials, like anybody. And so that can be a trigger to set up into this fight, you know, the sympathetic nervous system arousal. Well, there's authority all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to get to that place where you can start investigating, and you go halfway through those 17 steps and you go, oh, they call that the gateway to karma in Tibetan Buddhism, you know, that place right there that you can pause and say, oh, is this true that this thing I'm thinking? Are all men turkeys? Are all people in authority corrupt? Are, you know, is everyone that's Black somebody that's going to be a sexual abuser? That my vice principal is Black, right? And so are all Black men dangerous? No. You know, once you get to an adult brain, which doesn't get fully developed till you're 26 years old, now you have this place where you can go you can investigate that, because every single time you've set up that belief system and that meaning and that behavior of response, you're now in your perceptual field. Every time, like if I were to see a Black man every time, then, you know, I would say, and then cortisol would start racing through my system from my adrenals, which then breaks down my gut wall. Over time, as that continues, now bad bugs move into that area.
And then triggering the immune system.
Now you've got an immune response that gets triggered, you know, and so all of this goes together in one response that has to do with your own thought process. It has nothing to do with anything outside of you. It's all inside. And so that's the interesting thing. People want to do a lot of like supplements to change their microbiome, and they want to do this, you know, like cortisol manager to change their cortisol. It isn't about that. It's about your mind. Yes. And so, you know, like having to heal that and go, oh, you know, and that's the attachment healing when you go to that little 10-year-old and say, no, this isn't that. You know, like all these airport security people are not corrupt and bad, you know, and you're safe because I've got you now. No one's ever going to do that to you again. I've got you. And so, I'm always putting that little one behind me instead of in front of me leading, right?
Mhm.
Now I've got her by the hand and I'm holding on to her, and I'm not requiring someone else to do that. I'm not getting activated, if I get pulled over, which hasn't happened in many years, but it used to happen when I was a teenager. I would go straight into panicked rabbit. And I think probably everyone, no one likes getting pulled over, but I really, really would go into a numb, speechless state, like catatonic.
Wow. So you're right into freeze.
They couldn't even get me to get my registration out,
Right.
I would just go into this complete freeze, right? And it was because I was afraid that this police officer who's just asking for my registration, right, is dangerous, which all of these things are problems that are on the social calendar right now of being dealt with. And I don't want to bring that up, right, around race and authority and things like that. I'm talking about my own tracking of my own hurt. And, these are my perceptions from a 10-year-old state, and it doesn't have any social construct, right? It's just what that 10-year-old experienced. And that's actually what happens. We carry this into our society interactions, right?
Well, with us everywhere.
Yeah.
Keesha, I had a question from Myrna, and I don't know how you'll answer this. It might be sort of a side thing, but will exposing your truth to others make you a lot worse at the start and ultimately restore health the further into the journey?
It just depends, Myrna, on what your objective is, right? And so sometimes when it blows family systems apart, because a lot of times, like if you're talking about a capital T trauma, which is, the domestic violence, sexual abuse, psychological, emotional, spiritual abuse, neglect, abandonment, the things from the ACEs quiz, which are in my book, the Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, you might like create some social distress, right? If you come from a place where you want revenge, right, and you want
Not the
right, that's not the space. For me, it was, I focused on, and I keep a little picture. I encourage people always to do this. Keep a little picture of your little self, right, nearby, so that you can connect to her. It's not up to anyone else to fix this, right? This is you. This is your healing you. And so I call it borrowing a brain. You may need some therapy and guidance for that, which is probable, if you have capital T trauma. And that's what I do with people. But what I'm aiming for is not to make them dependent on the therapeutic process, but to free them, right? To be able to do it for themselves. So that once you learn the skills and the tools for that anything that comes up, you can do it. And it can make you worse in the beginning part of if you are allowing your emotional system to get flooded. But there are tools for creating harmony in that too, where you're not getting flooded. So,
using the right tools. I heard you say this, and it was really profound to me. The girl is the mother of the woman, and the boy is the father of the man. We're not used to thinking about that, but that little girl birthed us as women. And so she has a part in who we are now and needs to be reconciled. But I like what you said there about you doing it in the right way, using the right tools and supports.
Right.
In the end, though, what we want is freedom and be able to go through life without those feelings of resentment, anger, weight of the world on our shoulders, and all those things. Because our genetic expression is actually altered by our brains, right? I know you talked about that before. So how does that
brain
happen?
By the mind.
By the mind. Yes, that's right.
Which is different.
It is. You're right. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. And I like to change that up for people to it's not the brain. Everyone wants it to be about neuroscience, right? But it's actually about the mind, and we are quite lazy beings when it comes to mind. Any emotion or thought that comes up, we just feel like we can fall into it and wallow in it, but we have a choice. Your mind does not need to lead. You can actually drop it into your heart, pull up compassion and love and patience and practice those things. It takes effort. It's not an effortless process to
Right.
train the mind to not be dominant.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you talk about tools to do that, where we get really in touch with our body and feeling that. So can you talk a little bit about that, Dr. Keesha?
Yeah. So, the girl as the mother of the woman and the boy as the father of the man is less, this hopefully is less about the parents that brought you into the world and focuses more on you, where you have that power to be able to raise yourself into the woman that you're meant to be or the man you're meant to be. Mm-hmm. And it's not always saying, well, this is how my parents failed me, right? It's now you learning the skills. And so from that, then you go, okay, so it's just willingness. On the hurt model that I created from my study in 2013, there's a maladaptive memory processing loop that leads to disease. And then there's an adaptive one. And in the center of it, it says willingness to self-confront. That has to be present. Willingness to confront your own mind with compassionate curiosity and say, is this thought that my mind keeps putting up in front of me, is it healthy? Is it true? Is it needful right now? Or is it causing me suffering? Am I ruminating on it, going back and forth on automatic negative thoughts, creating a nervous system response that's been there for years, and then leading into cortisol release, microbiome dysfunction, like all of that, right? And so the first 24 hours, the first thing you could do is really just contemplate and witness. Then you just pull this witness of your own self outside of you and begin to watch and listen and observe your own mind's workings. How often do you trip and fall into a pothole of misery that your mind just created? Maybe it's by being in a future state, like, oh, this is going to happen, or this person is going to do this, and not being in the present moment. In this present moment, what can you find for your mind to chew on? I have a puppy, and if I moved the camera, you would see all around me are all these little chew toys, because I want my puppy to not chew on the desk or my chair or my slipper under the desk. I want to say, no, not that. Here's this you can chew on. You can do that with your mind and need to do that with your mind, right? So let's chew on this instead. And so that's always a practice. That's an efforting that needs to happen, and not to have lazy mind where you just default, right? It's old patterns.
Yeah. I always ask this question at the end of the interview, and we're just coming up to time, but you actually just addressed it. Like, the one thing you can do today to improve your health is, as you said, watching our thoughts. And when are we slipping into this automatic negative?
The follow through on that is tracking the thought, and how does your body feel?
Yes.
Like, a lot of times people with autoimmunity are disconnected from here down, right? And the body and the mind are not working together. That's what autoimmunity is you're at war with yourself. So there's not a collaborative alliance there. And so we want to move from combative into collaborative, which takes some compassionate curiosity, like, oh, body, how do you feel as a result of that thought? Right. And so the clenching of your jaw, the raising and tightening of your shoulders, the tightening of your belly, the constriction and contraction around your heart, the numbness of not being able to feel anything in your body, that's all feedback for you.
Yes.
Right. Not to judge, not to feel bad about, not to, just to witness and say, oh, I see. Okay. Well, this is where we go next. And you may need to get some help with that.
So beautiful. And I want to leave everyone with the knowledge that there is hope. Like, we're told so often, you and I both have the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. Nothing you can do. It's going to get progressively worse. And it's simply not true.
Nope.
You can change your physiology. using these tools. So there is hope. And I'm really so thankful, Dr. Keesha, that you came on today to share that hope with our audience.
Thank you so much.
Where can people find out more about you?
Actually, drkeesha.com, drkeesha.com. And then I wrote Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle to pre-educate people about all this. And I'm in the process of writing a book on healing trauma right now, which actually delves into how to have your little girl raise you into a really great woman.
I love it. I can't wait for that one to come out. Thank you so much for being my guest today on Wellness by Design. And thank you to the people that have been watching live and to the people that will be listening to the podcast. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.